I want to kind of do some different things this time around. Like I want to have a little bit more audience interaction in some of these sessions. We could even have open forums because there's just so much right now coming in this world, in this social media cycle. It's just coming at us thousands of miles an hour. You can say so much different stuff to discuss. So I picked this topic here. Next week, I'll segue from this one into another one. This week, we're going to be focusing on our new president that has happened during my absence. We are going to be talking about the H-1B controversy, which arose. And of course, what conveniently happened when they saw the backlash of the lies that had been marketed to them for the entire time of Trump's, attempt to run for his second term. And they didn't immediately go right back to who? Us. And we're going to break that thing down here in the beginning. So we had an election, didn't we? And anyone who knows me for the last 5 years, I'm not bragging, all the glory goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I have a very good ability for pattern recognition. And I know these guys very well. And I predicted this when he lost the first time. I said, this is all part of a plan. We saw the entire time that he was not in office. You had the fake arrests, the fake trials. I told people not a thing is going to come from him from this. This is Operation Build Public Trust. They saw people were losing trust in the system. So they have to let you believe that some outsider, some independent guy was able to break through and he's got the best interest of you and the country, and he's going to fix things. Go back to sleep, turn on the television, watch the ball game. They're all going to handle it. Game, set, match, the end. And that's basically, again, what we've seen, some modern day political sorcery. They've convinced everyone this guy is a maverick. He went against the grain. They tried to kill him. Remember that one? Where every single Secret Service protocol was broken, where you had him standing after supposedly a shooter had just fired upon him. He's allowed to stand up and do the infamous posing and all the things that you saw, which broke every single security protocol. And the Secret Service allowed him to do this. Why? Because, of course, it was staged, all to create an image that they didn't want this guy. This guy was against the establishment. He was going to change things for us. We're going to see just how much. He hasn't even gotten in yet. And we're already going to see where this story is going. So we had this exciting election. We had just a week ago, 15 people killed in New Orleans, countless others wounded. I haven't gotten the official updates on that, but 15 were confirmed dead, numerous wounded. The gentleman by the name of Shamsuddin Jabbar. Basically, this guy was heralded as ISIS all the way. They've come to America. Here's the jihad. And of course, this was very convenient, the timing of this, because they were seeing that backlash against what we're going to be kind of focusing most of this on today. So they had to do something, to come out here and, get all of our attention off what was going on. So we saw they had this Mr. Shamsuddin. Now, they say he was a prominent member, that he was a religious fanatic. I saw numerous tweets and posts in social media from a lot of brothers from the Muslim community in Houston. They never heard of this guy. They never saw this guy. He was not in the masjid. And I mean, granted, that's a possibility that people blend in. I've been to masjids many times. And if you asked me to say every brother there, I could not do it, of course. You've got hundreds of brothers and, the sisters obviously in the back. I could not identify them in a lineup, but he was supposed to be an active member. I was an active member in the community here in my city. And I guarantee that most of the people would have been able to know who I was. At least they wouldn't know me personally, but they would have known my face, my likeness, and so on. They didn't know who this guy was. So hardly he doesn't fit the bill already. Well, in 2020, it gets even better. This guy was arrested for drunk driving, intoxicated well beyond legal limits. Is this, again, a guy that is out there ready to die for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, supposedly, and willing to kill innocent people for supposedly his religion? So we find this. He's also in the U.S. military, for 10 years. And he was in a place called Fort Bragg. I know Fort Bragg very well. The reason I lived 2 minutes from it growing up in my childhood and my teenage years. Fort Bragg is, if all of you who are American, obviously will know, one of the largest army bases in the world in term. Excuse me? Fort Bragg. There was a feedback coming through. So Fort Bragg is one of the major bases where they recruit people for future intelligence operations. It's got a lot of deep covert stuff coming out of it, specialized, high-level training. This gentleman served in the U.S. military for 10 years out of Fort Bragg. So, of course, we want to extend our condolences to all the victims. I don't think this is something that we do a good enough job of doing. So if there's any Christians, non-Muslims, atheists who are watching me, whether it's live or see the feeds of this, to know, of course, in no way, shape, or form do we condemn this guy. No way am I sitting here making excuses. But the dots don't connect. You see all these things. Now let's get a little bit better here. So just a few days after this attack happened, we had a Zionist reporter. She went to his home. And this is quite funny because this is a federal crime. It's terrorism. That means that his home would have been locked down. It would have been impossible by basic protocols for any journalist to just be able to walk into a crime scene like this and walk around and mess with his stuff and touch his stuff. And this gets really, really comical as this lady is supposedly in this terrorist's house. She goes inside and she finds the Quran on his mantle above his fireplace, and it's opened to basically an ayah. I didn't read the ayah, obviously. They never let you zoom in enough. But she claimed it was an ayah about martyrdom and Allah's blessings to the martyrs. That could be several ayah, obviously. But how convenient, right? How convenient. The book is open right there. There's a passage on martyrdom, supposedly. And for what I could tell, it was one of those three-way Qurans, I call them, where they have the English letters, the English words here. You have the Arabic text, and then you have the Arabic text written in English for your tajweed and your practice. I was able to see that. So as she continues going through his apartment, we see, of course, the Palestinian scarf is hanging there in his closet, all prominent to be able to be viewed. How convenient, right? And then we see that they claimed it was a prayer book, but more likely, I don't think they knew what hadith was. It was supposedly a hadith on the pages of the virtues of jihad. So, again, it's laughable. I'm having a hard time not laughing even saying it. How scripted this whole thing seems to be from beginning to end. Again, we do not endorse. Our condolences go out to the innocent people, to their families. This is not, I challenge anyone to go inside the pages of our Holy Quran and find me any justification whatsoever for any attack like this. So again, the timing was perfect. It's an ultimate distraction. Donald Trump, as we're about to get to, angered quite a few people in the beginning of his not even begun tenure yet, just with some tweets that came out from some of his backers, and he backed those tweets up. So they needed the bad guy. And again, you have all of this stuff. So then you start seeing all the different quotes, and there was a famous UFC fighter. He got quite a many, views because he basically said, Islamic extremists, here's his quote. Let me read this right quick. Islamic extremists, you mean people who actually follow the Quran's teaching. Islam contributes nothing besides violence and oppression. Coming from a man who's made his millions punching people in the face and causing the goal of the ultimate fighting, if anyone's not familiar with it, is basically to give your opponent a concussion so he can't fight anymore. He's knocked out, or to make him submit. So you're a guy that for a living beats people up, and you're going to say there's nothing inside the pages of the Quran that is peaceful. Everything is violence. Well, I'd like to challenge him to simply do a live stream and go through the pages of the Quran with proper context and actually read them out and justify this claim. But it's social media. You don't have to justify anything. All you have to do is just put a buzzword and a cute phrase out there, and people will mindly parrot it. Yeah, Islam's a violent religion. I know it's a violent. I read the Quran. Really? Where'd you read that? I don't know. It's in there somewhere. I saw it. And they're not ever going to be able to actually pinpoint any ayah or nothing to the hand. So again, distractions. And the big distraction now, they've turned from this to the rape gang crisis in Great Britain, which will be the subject of next week. So back to Trump, we have a classic case of what we call meet the new boss, same as the old boss. I had done a political commentary here about 6 months ago, I think 5 or 6 months ago, where it was like left and right, Islam is right. I mean, we were showing again there that there was no difference, that politics, as I called it, was pro wrestling, that on the camera, they're the enemy, but behind the scenes, we are the enemy, and they're working together to destroy us. And Donald Trump was perfect, for this role. He was part of an operation to build public trust. Trust had been eroded and lost, especially after the scam of the COVID-19 pandemic. So many people in record numbers I was hearing, meeting them in person and reading their accounts and not trusting mainstream media anymore, not trusting the experts anymore, the political commentators. So they needed to get this guy back in, like I described in my opening. So already, what is he promoting? This is going to be quite interesting here. He wants Canada and Greenland. He wants to bring them as part of the United States. Now, I was called crazy and a loon in 2007 when I told people about the NAFTA project, the NAFTA superhighway that went all the way from southern Mexico all the way up to Canada, and all the eminent domain rules where the U.S. government can seize your property for a very low market level price and use that land for benefits of the nation, so to speak. That the goal has always been a North American Union. Now, when George Bush said this, oh, fascist, fascist. When Obama said this, the right wing, fascist, fascist. No one wanted it. No one wanted it or was endorsing this. They saw through it. But now Trump is out here. He's our guy. Remember, he went against it. They tried to kill him. They didn't want him in there. They rigged an election to stop him, but he just came back for us. He fought so hard for us. Now he's promoting it. It's okay now. All of a sudden, it's halal. And you see people openly promoting this in the conservative spheres. The Panama Canal, he wants to rename it, into the American Canal. And he wants to change the Gulf of Mexico to the American Gulf. And all this stuff is being met with a round of applause. Now, if you look in the Club of Rome publication, Club of Rome proposed what they call 10 economic kingdoms. And North America was kingdom number one. This is Canada, the United States, and Mexico. This has been the plan all along. They just needed the right guy to come in here and pitch it and sell it and get the people on board with it. You have Western Europe as another domain, Eastern Europe, you have the Middle East, you have the India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, that region in there. You have China, you have Japan and Korea, and South America. All different economic zones where they will abolish national borders. They've already started psychologically programming us for this by destroying cohesion and national unity, which we're going to get to here also in a little bit, all to get rid of any cultural attachment that these people have to their nations. We are nothing more than economic zones for the powerful oligarchs to make money. So another thing, he's not even in office yet, and he's already backstabbing the American workers. He's always been doing this, but again, people seem to be blind to it. Donald Trump famously said he wished he could staple green cards to the back of diplomas so that every single person that came in here and got a college education would automatically be eligible for a green card. I mean, as my situation proves with people of us job hunting, I don't think we have a need, obviously, for more workers, but we're coming to that in a minute. So along came a man, two men actually, famously, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. Vivek Ramaswamy is a guy that popped up this election cycle. I honestly never heard of him before. They called him the Indian Obama. He was the conservative Indian Obama. No one knew who this man was. You're being told, oh, he's based. He's great. Based means aware and honest and all these things. He's for the people. He's a champion. Well, who is Vivek Ramaswamy? Well, he is an anchor baby. His parents were not U.S. citizens. He achieved the nationality. We're going to talk about that through the 14th Amendment and the poor interpretations of it. His major claim to fame was a fraudulent stock IPO. He used his mother's medical background to get approved an Alzheimer's drug, which did not work. which he knew did not work. And he scammed and dumped. We call it a pump and dump or a rug pull. He got all the shareholders to buy into his company. Once the test results came back that the drug was useless, he had already dumped his stock. All of them were left holding nothing, holding the bags. And this is the man they put on the camera who they told us he's with you. You know, he's passionate. He wants to deport the illegals. Well, he wants to do something else, you know, also, as we are going to get here in a minute. And then emerged Elon Musk, who I have to say, and, you know, lack of a better term, the praise I've seen heaped on this man in the past year has made me want to vomit. You know, no offense to people who are sick who currently do want to vomit, obviously, but that's what he made me feel. I saw right through him. You look at his father's origins. He was an emerald merchant in South Africa. He exploited the economy there, exploited his own people, sold out to the you-know-whos we were talking about all throughout our Palestine series, who have taken over the resources and control of them in South Africa. Elon Musk is painted as some kind of revolutionary entrepreneur, even though he's never invented anything. He simply just used his money to buy up influence in companies that had already existed off the backs of other people. He's now $420 billion with a B. You know, you're talking enough money to really make dramatic change in this country, but yet in the hands of just one man. He bought Twitter and he opened up, they called it, for free speech. Well, there is free speech there. His Twitter is filled with hate from all sides. I mean, you can go to Twitter and see the most hateful things posted by supposed Black Americans about white Americans, by white Americans to African Americans, by just about every group. I mean, you go on there and lately it's been Islam, Islam, Islam. And just like I gave a quote from a gentleman who posted on Twitter the things he had to say, that's tame. I mean, we got women and children here. Some of the filthy, vile things they say about Muslims, about the messenger of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and, you know, of course, all the Sahaba and our religion and Christianity as well. You can say anything dirty and filthy about Isa, you know, and you can say anything about any of the church members or Christian communities, and it's all completely tolerated. But if you go after a certain few amount of groups, and I think we know who one of those is already, I'll talk about the other one, you will get demonetized and you will get basically banished. You'll get threatened. The other group, of course, the Zionists being number one, if you post anything about them and you're a prominent account, automatically you're going to get your monetized powers reduced. You're going to get your blue check marks revoked. You can say, again, hateful things about whites, about blacks, about Asians, about Muslims, about Christians. You say anything about that group of people, that's a different story. And Elon Musk's Twitter is embodying this. Also, the other group now that he's demonetizing people for is the Hindus. You know, if anyone is familiar with what the Hindus are doing to Muslims in India, if anyone is familiar with Hindu culture and Hindu beliefs, if you dare to now criticize any of these beliefs or any of these practices or things, you will also get that stuff, you know, banned. And Elon Musk has always been transparent, as I mentioned. If you look at his X logo that he's created, if you look at how the X is shaded where one side is bigger than the other, that's nothing but the left side of the compass in the square of masonry. That's all that symbol is. When I saw it, there's masonry. I've been looking into these guys longer than I would like to admit, and I'm pretty familiar with spotting their symbolism and then pretty much telling you who they are. And when he changed that logo, oh, there it is. That's the compass in the square. There's the X. There's the fat part there of the compass. And then you have the square that comes down, which makes the masonry symbol. So again, he's telling you right in your face. And if anyone's familiar with that cartel of criminals, obviously they don't have our best interest at heart. So even going before Trump and Vivek, they were conditioning the American people to accept their next plan, which is flooding the United States of America with unlimited amounts of basically these, what we're going to call H-1B visas. J.D. Vance, who was selected as Trump's running mate, his wife is of Hindu origin. She is a practicing Hindu. I had talked about in my one lecture about politics, about the Republican convention. And during the Republican convention, they had the Hindu woman giving the Hindu prayer in a Christian country. This is blasphemous. Whether you're Muslim or Christian, we view Christians as people of the book. They're 2/3 of the way for the truth. They've got one little big third. They've got to make that jump to come to the right side, but they're right there with us. But when you get into this other stuff, you're talking blasphemous, you're talking shirk, you're talking every major sin in the Islamic religion. For any of those who are not familiar with Hinduism, take a brief 5 to 10 minutes and you'll see what I'm talking about. So they were conditioning us again to get comfortable with the idea of flooding Americans with these H-1B visas, which we're going to talk about the statistics on them coming up. So these are non-immigrant visas that allow U.S. employers to supposedly temporarily employ foreign workers. And again, these people are at mercy to their employer. They are not allowed to leave or their visa gets revoked. A lot of them apply for citizenship after their period of time is ending. And again, they're saying that they need to start bringing in the best and the brightest, or the economy is going to collapse. This is a new one. They're saying now that they're doing the jobs that Americans are not qualified to do. Remember, it used to be they do the jobs that Americans won't do. That's been beat over my head all my life. Oh, they're doing the jobs Americans won't do. When I grew up, people I knew picked tobacco. People I knew picked cotton. I knew farmer kids who did these jobs. I knew teenagers who did these jobs. The thing was, they weren't going to do the jobs for the price that the illegals were going to do the jobs. And they framed that argument as, oh, they're doing the jobs Americans won't do. And the whole argument was, oh, don't worry, though, because the high-skilled jobs that Americans are qualified for, they're not coming for those. Only the low-level hotel cleaners and crop harvesters and things like that. But now they're telling us, and again, the joke is on us. They're telling us, no, they're doing the jobs that we're not qualified, to do. So this, again, is what jobs at this point are Americans supposed to be good enough for? Target, Walmart, McDonald's? You go into McDonald's now. When I grew up, that was a teenage job. That prepared young men for work and young women for responsibility. Those jobs were never to feed a family. Now you see in these jobs, there's grown adults, of immigrant backgrounds working these jobs. Because again, accepting of lower standard of living, lower salary, that's what this is about. It's never been about being able to fill a void or they can't. Me and Sister Layla were talking in the beginning. I'm 17 years experience in my field, 17 years. I've wrote more safety programs and curriculums than anyone I've met. That's not to brag. I'm proud of myself, but I have done that. And I can't find a job. The construction industry is off limits to me. I can't even apply for a construction industry job in health and safety management anymore because I don't speak Spanish or I'm not of a Hispanic background. Because they've only hired these guys for the low-level labor construction position, so you can't train them in English. You can't manage them in English. You have to have someone who speaks Spanish. So they've basically taken that option. Half of my experience is in construction. The other half is in manufacturing. I can't find a job in half of what I'm qualified to do. It's getting to the point of insanity. Where am I to go? Well, again, Walmart, Target, all these people out here that have studied and dedicated their lives, their careers, are now being told, you're not qualified anymore. We have to bring in an H-1B to be able to do this. So in June of 2024, I got this statistic. More than 32 million. That's 19% of a total workforce. And it's an increase from just 7 million in 2010. So what happened? You're talking 19% of our workforce is foreign born. Where are the Americans that used to work those jobs? Where are they? What happened to them? Did they just decide they didn't want to work anymore? Or are they struggling being unemployed? And I think we know the answer to that. Or they had to accept pay cuts and lower their standard of living because they simply couldn't get a job. No one wanted to hire them. You're American. You want a vacation. I don't like you. You don't want to work 70 hours a week. There was even an immigrant, and bless his heart, I mean, for wanting to boast about being a hard worker. But he was saying, oh, well, I have an advantage over all you because I'm willing to work 70 hours a week. Well, 70 hours a week work is about as close to slavery as you can get. I mean, that's stripping your work-life balance. That's stripping all essence of your humanity and basically turning you into nothing but a mindless server, basically, for the pockets of corporate America. You are not going to have any high-level quality of life living such a way. And out of the 319,494 in 2020, 75% of these H-1Bs have come from one country and one country only, and that's India. And again, and I don't want anyone to get offended. I met some beautiful Indian brothers, but India's got 1.5 billion people. India has a lot of corruption issues. And instead of basically taking this line of caring for our Muslim brothers in India, help them there. I mean, we don't have to bring in, 50 million, 60 million to this country or 1 million, 2 million until we can guarantee that every American has a right to work, has a job that they're qualified for, of course, and is able to serve their family and live a happy, wholesome, fulfilled life. And then you add in the other aspects of this. So it's not just the workers. When they get the green cards, now you have a couple of other problems. You have the family reunifications, where they bring unlimited amounts of family members effortlessly. The immigration lawyers have made a killing off of this. And then you have the anchor baby, which is one of the most disgusting things that the American people have tolerated for far too long. This all stems from the 14th Amendment. For those of you not familiar with the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, this was a dilemma that had occurred during the time where slavery was abolished. You had a huge population of African American slaves who some people wanted to repatriate back to Africa. Others felt that we owed them, a service, obviously, for what had happened. And there was a emphasis, basically, of getting these people to be accepted, as Americans. So the 14th Amendment was introduced for the descendants of these slaves to guarantee they had citizenship in the only country, the only land they had ever known. It was not their choice to come here. It was not their choice to live in the conditions that they lived in. And they were now granted U.S. citizenship. And since this point in time, around the 1960s, we've seen this being abused on a level that most people have no idea. When I lived abroad, I saw the people. I talked to them. I heard the stories. They would come into the airports. The woman is 9 months pregnant. She comes here. There's a citizen right there, on the spot. They would immediately get on welfare, and they would take advantage of the system, because you can't deport the child, so you have to keep the mother. And then, of course, the father and everyone else. And this has been, Chinese have been birth tourism, they call it, have really abused this. And we have so many, again, of these type of people that are coming into this country and are just simply raping our resources, to be honest. And we're going to get to a little bit more about that here in a minute. Now, our government despises us. That's one of the cores of the matter. Is that I lived in Saudi Arabia, I lived in Bahrain, I visited UAE, I visited and worked in Oman. I went to many North Africa, Sudan in particular, spent time there doing some work and some training. I never saw the level of disdain from a government towards its people that the American government and the corporate establishment has towards us. They view us as needy, demanding. We are a pain for them to have to deal with. They despise us with their very being. That's why you see every single thing they do in Washington is never for our benefit. It's always they're sending to Ukraine. They're sending billions in Ukraine. We have people in our inner cities that are living in dilapidated housing and, for government housing as well. We have people that can't get loans. They can't get themselves, or we're talking about riba, obviously, but good quality non-interest loans. Imagine what we could do with the billions and billions of dollars that we've sent to their buddies in Ukraine, to all their other dirty projects around the world. But you don't see this. You see everything our government does is to make our lives worse. I had joked one time when I was in a break room, and we were having a discussion. One of the guys was saying, "Oh, the Democrats and Republicans, they can't cross the aisles." And I used this line in that past presentation I did. And I found him a newspaper clipping in the state of North Carolina. 99% of the representatives in the House in North Carolina had voted to raise college tuition. 99%. When it came to messing us over and making our lives more difficult, more problematic, putting us in more debt, they had no problem crossing the aisles and shaking hands on that one. When it comes to sending money to Ukraine, they have no problem doing that. When it comes to all the other foreign aid that they use for their dirty leaders around the world, they prop up. They have no problem doing that. But when it comes to giving something to the American people of all walks of life, they certainly can't come to an agreement. Now, I want to throw out a side note here and compare that to what I was reading last week about the most hated Islamic group, arguably in history. Maybe Al-Qaeda, but these guys at least are number one. Number two, the Taliban in Afghanistan. We hear all the Taliban, they're so evil, they're so wicked. The Taliban just introduced a program where drug addicts are taken off the streets. They are given accommodation, beggars as well, people who have no home, who are begging for money, drug addicts. They're took off the streets. They're put into safe havens. They're cleaned up, sobered up, off the drugs. And the Taliban trains them on vocational skills. You know, they train these people to build their lives. Alhamdulillah. I mean, where could we ever see anything slightly resembling this in this country? But yet we're told, oh, Taliban bad. You know, America's freedom. We're spreading freedom around the world. You know, we're bringing goodness, is what we always were learning in school. But yet you have a government program here to help their people, to develop their people. I mean, the amount of things I saw in Saudi Arabia and UAE, the things that those governments did to help newly married couples get a home, not charging them riba, putting them into debt. All these programs, us Americans, we have like a blanket thrown over our head. We're so used to being overtaxed on everything. You're taxed when you earn it. Then when you want to spend it, you're taxed. If you want to basically give it to somebody, you're taxed on that. And then when you die, they're going to tax it before your relatives get it. We are so used to that life that we have no idea what other countries are doing. And we're always told how these people are the bad guys. The Taliban also gives aid per month, depending on the family member. They were giving like aid to women who lost their husbands. We always hear the Taliban hates women. You know, they beat women. They cut the women's hands off for trying to read. We hear all these comical jokes in the media. But yet when we look at the reality, you know, you see something quite different here. So this is what is going on. And I saw this cartoon which kind of sums it up, you know, perfectly. In the cartoon, you had Elon Musk sitting at the middle of the table, and he had a pile of cookies on his plate like that. On the right-hand side, you had an American construction worker. He had one cookie only. And then you had an Indian guy coming from India on an H-1B on the left with an empty plate. And Elon Musk was pointing basically at the Americans saying, give it to him now. And that really sums it up. You know, that you have this fat cat with 420 billion with a B, you know, net worth, and he's out here basically penny pinching to gain more wealth and telling us that we're not qualified. They called us lazy over the last 2 weeks. They said that we have a bad culture, that we don't learn, we don't graduate enough STEM personnel, when in fact we do. They just can't find jobs. But I don't want to lose sight and people to listen to this and think, oh, well, Brother Yusuf's attacking immigrants. No, these people are victims also. It is a race to ruin our lives. Those people come from corrupt nations, poor nations, where they're being exploited daily by their government. They're just changing one exploiter to the other. And by them being exploited here simultaneously, they are lowering our standard of life because they want us all to be like that. They want us all to own nothing, because when you own nothing and you have no purchasing power, you can't affect things. You can't make noise. You can't change this system. It's not a brain drain like they call it. It is a wage drain. It is a race to the bottom. There's never been as much disparity in wealth as there is in this nation now. It's continuing to flow into the hands of the few. They are owning everything, and we are owning nothing. 0.1% of people, last I checked, own over 99.5 or something percent of the wealth. They own it all, and they're making sure that we own less and less as we continue to move on. So again, how does this impact specifically? We're going to be looking at American Muslims. I want to focus on here, and I'll define that in a second. But of course, as always, I don't want people to misconstrue this. There are brothers and sisters in all ways of life that we love, obviously. They are our brothers in Islam. I'm only referring to the people, who abuse the system. We are not anyone pursuing a better way of life. You can't fault them, at all. But we as Americans also have to pursue a good way of life for ours and our families. Immigration is at the core of Islamic history. The Quran immortalizes the plight of the Meccan immigrants. And the Quran also emphasizes the tremendous care that the Ansar provided them and the blessing that there was for that. So we've always been, in our culture and our religion, open to the concept of immigration. So we're not here to paint all immigrants with the same brush. It goes counter, to our Islamic creed. So the very core of Islam was immigration. Without immigration, who knows? Allah knows best where Islam would have been, how long maybe it taken to establish itself. But all the talk you're going to hear from the controlled Muslim leaders in the West is immigration is great. We should accept unlimited amounts of immigration. I've had conversations with these people, and I've had to ask them, when is enough enough? How many immigrants should we take? 10 million, 50 million, 100 million? When is enough enough? When does our charity exhaust you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never, calls upon us to put ourselves on the street, for the sake of charity. In our zakah reflects that. We are very charitable people, and we believe in charity. But there is a limit. You cannot continue to give and give and give, especially to people who are openly even hostile to us. As I described with a lot of the Hindus are openly hostile to us, as with a lot of people from South America also are very openly hostile to us. But to raise this issue, as me and Sister Layla were talking before we went live, you're already called the R word. Oh, you're a racist. Let them. At the end of the day, you use a word when it doesn't have any meaning, the word loses meaning. It loses its power. It's like you just keep labeling people that just for a simple, honest conversation about the limits of what we can and can't absorb. Housing now, for all of you who are paying rent, it doesn't matter where you're at. I looked up, when I was looking for a job, I looked up a city I never even heard of. It had a population of 1,700. And I was thinking about looking to maybe get something there and travel 35, 40 minutes to the job site that was away from that city. Even in that city, as I looked up the rent, it was almost exactly the same as it is here, because we have a major housing issue. We have problems with housing already. And you're going to bring in all these extra people on these H-1B programs. How much higher is the housing going to go? And you always hear, again, from these same Elon Musk types, immigration is great for the economy. And this is the first argument they ever use against you. Oh, it's besides the racist term. This is great for the economy. Well, in kabuki theater, and playing with numbers, yeah, it is great for them. It raises housing prices. Is that great for a family trying to buy a home? It raises your rent. Is that great if you're the renter? But it's great for the landlord. It raises food prices. That's great for McDonald's. That's great for Kroger, for Walmart. But is it great for me and you? It raises all of these things, but it's good for them. It's definitely good for them. But for us, we're the ones that have less and less of our paychecks to enjoy, to invest in our children and all of these things because of this insane population increase. So as Muslims here in America, now when I'm talking about foundational, Americans, we are the Americans who, this is our land. We are African Americans. We are white Caucasian Americans, early Asians, Chinese, Japanese in origin, some with their roots back to the 1800s, building railroads, establishing cities. We're talking about people who've come into this country and have followed the laws and have been very good citizens, good members in the Muslim community. When the Muslim community, which is comprised in my local city mostly of immigrants from Morocco, when they thought, well, they didn't understand the true story. They thought I was in a bad financial situation, and they got money together and brought it to me. And I said, brother, I can't accept this. I'm in a bad, stressful situation, but I'm not in a bad financial situation. That's just, again, the type of love, that came. These are not the people, obviously, we're referring to. These are people who've established their roots here, who have contributed, but again, we do have limits. So foundational Americans who this is our only home. We don't have anywhere else to go. These H-1B holders and a lot of these illegal immigrants, they have multiple travel documents in some cases. They can always, if it's a Mexican migrant worker, he has Mexico as his home. He's able to go there and invest and own property in his land. If you're an immigrant from Jordan, as an example, you can always go back to Jordan. If you're an immigrant from Egypt or even Morocco or Saudi Arabia, there are some, they have Saudi passports, they have American passports. They can go back. They can always pick and choose where they want to live. But for us, this is all we've got. I can't just get on a plane tomorrow and say, hey, I've got country number 2 in my back pocket. We have to be invested in this place. They allow us to practice our religion freely. We can open our masjids. We can practice Islam in alignment with the Quran and the Sunnah. We're born here. We have family here. We have places that we remember fondly, places we don't remember fondly. But this is our home. And we have to love our home. We don't love our government, but we love our good neighbors and we love our friends that we've met along the way and our family. And we don't have that backup plan. If any of us try to take a hijrah to any Muslim, so-called Muslim in name only, country, what's going to happen? None of them are going to accept us. As an example, some of the ones in the Gulf, you can't own an apartment. You can't own a house. You can't ever have citizenship. If you raise your children there, they will not be allowed to go to the universities. I know firsthand, I've got family members who go through this ordeal, Palestinians and Syrians. They are not allowed to send their kids to colleges or universities. Is that equality? Absolutely not. We don't hear any of these Muslim leaders ever talking about that. But we are supposed to be completely open to them to come into our country and compete for our jobs and our resources when there's no reciprocity. It doesn't go both ways. If I want to make hijrah, good luck. As I said, can't do it. So we have to make our home the best possible. This is where Allah put us. Me as a revert, I reverted to Islam, born and raised in America, ancestry back to the beginning on my mother's side, back to the early 1900s on my father's side. I have to be invested here, and I don't have any other choice. So again, we are sympathetic to these conditions of the others, but we have to have, limits. And then the other problem that comes from some of these groups, as an example, the top 3 wealthiest Indian philanthropists have invested the majority of their wealth in causes that affect, guess who? Only their people. So you cannot be an American by its nature, by who we are comprised of as a people, when your loyalties lie elsewhere. We spent 9 episodes shedding light on the Zionists, whose loyalties obviously lie elsewhere, who have exploited this country, who have exploited Great Britain, who've exploited Western Europe with all of this stuff. We don't need more groups coming in here, bringing racial identity politics, fracturing the community, only caring about their own group, sending all their money back home. Again, that's money exiting the American economy. We see them forming groups that work only on behalf of these specific individual groups. And again, this leads to a breakdown in social cohesion. No one views themselves as a neighbor or a brother. Loss of trust. Everybody's constantly pitted against each other. As anyone knows, America, we've had a long and ugly history of white and black relations that we're starting to get better, as I saw in my lifetime, a lot better. But then guess what? The media has to come back and try to use social media to have bot accounts and whip all this stuff up again. I'll give you some classic examples. in the I think it was the Euros, one of the soccer tournaments that happened in England a few years ago. There were some African English players who were playing for England, born and raised in England, and one of them had missed a penalty kick. Now, I'm not very big into soccer. I grew up here, but I got caught wind of this story because it's very telltale to what we're talking about. And they started getting racially abused by accounts that had white faces, appeared to be white British. When they did the investigation on where these tweets were coming from, they found the majority of them were coming from bot farms in places like India, where they pay these people money to come on social media and whip up racial division. So if you're an African who's grown up in Britain, who's starting to feel attached to your country and loving the people, wanting to be a part of it, and then you see this, you're going to be, oh, those people hate me. So why should I love them? And then again, boom, you have this tension. They continuously have whipped it up. And now by introducing new groups who don't like us, like I mentioned, the Hindus in particular, you are going to have a natural division being created. And again, it creates loss of trust. It makes people less, as studies have proven, less likely to participate in civil activities. You have language and cultural barriers. You know, English unifies us speaking here as Muslims the way the Arabic language does. If you can't understand each other, you can't love each other. You can't really truly know a person. Immigrants, when my father's generation came, they learned English immediately because that's what was required to do. We've got some of these people in the country now for 50 years. They speak 3 English words, and some even not even that. Maybe, hey, how are you? Goodbye. And again, it's causing tension. As I mentioned, you have cultural clashes. Islam has proven that multiracialism worked under Islam. There's no such thing in a lot of Muslim countries traditionally as color bias. You had class bias, you know, but whether you were African or of Caucasoid European descent or Asiatic or whatnot, you know, generally in the Muslim Ummah, race wasn't as much of a factor. But when you have different cultures, you have hatred and you have animosity because one culture has one given set of morals and tolerances and the other has another one. And you don't see it. And culture becomes such an ego thing that for someone who's not Muslim, they see if they become Muslim, oh, I'm giving into Arabic culture. So you have this little ego battle going on, which creates even more division. And this stuff just continues to rise. I mentioned it creates suppressed wages. The more workers, the more employers can lower the wage. Everybody needs a job. I saw a video a few years ago. There was one job posted in India, and there was about 10,000 people lined up for that job. Do you think that employer is going to pay high dollar for that job when there's that many people that want it? It's a race, again, to the bottom. You see prices in consumer goods, as I mentioned, continue to rise. We see the economic damages from all the remittances, sending the money back home. We see lower quality schools for our children because people are coming in who are not learning English. There's no emphasis in the home. This slows down the classroom. It fills up the classroom sizes. It affects our children. Why would any citizenry benefit from this? What is any benefit at all? And it's almost like they try to find the biggest powder keg that they can throw into something. Okay, who hates this group? Who hates this group? Okay, let's bring a lot of those people in now to just increase this tension. Everyone knows Muslims and Hindus have tons of tension. Everyone knows already that Christians and Hindus have had tensions in India. So let's just bring a bunch of Hindus into a Christian or Muslim nation. And then, of course, you create that tension. It's very good for the Zionist. It is divide and conquer. It allows us to be spending all of our time worrying about each other and disliking each other and arguing with each other and this and that while they're sitting there dropping our wages and driving us to the ground. And again, these are the cases we see so many of these so-called refugees. And what I say by so-called refugees is these are people that are not even leaving war at all. There's no war in their country. I saw one, he said he's homosexual. And they awarded him, the guy, you look at the guy clearly, you can tell he's not homosexual, at least from the visual standpoint. And they're using this. They're using a variety of other reasons. My country's politically unstable. You have to let me in. We've let in so many South American gang members, open criminals, hostile to us and their own people. who have terrorized places like El Salvador for decades are now being openly welcomed across the border. Joe Biden took all the blame for that, but this show is going to go on under Trump as well. No one has a right to live here. It is not a God-given right to live in America. It's not a God-given right to live in Saudi Arabia. It's not a God-given right to live in any particular place we want to. There's got to be rules and restrictions. And again, we are called, cold-hearted and the R word and all of those things. But at the end of the day, what we want is what's best for the people. Like I said, our nation, our family, our neighbors, our friends, and so on. And right now, it's not happening. Our government is an open, hostile enemy. They say the economy is good, but again, it's good for the investors. It's good for the wealthy. It is not good for us in any means. And again, the immigrants are not our enemy, although some of them are. As if you're a gang member and you're coming into my country to sell drugs, you are my enemy. If you're coming into my country to whip up racial division, you're my enemy. If you're coming in the country to hate me and my religion or the color of my skin, you are my enemy. It's not a hard statement to make. And a lot of these people are, but there's a lot of, like I said, very, very beautiful brothers I've met who are first-generation immigrants who have added to this country, who've added to me, and of course, none of them are what we are covering here tonight. All right, Sister Layla, I timed it at about 55 minutes. We can take questions, answers, and discussions.